When did it become a crime to find a story boring? If you watched a TV show and you didn't like it, and then I told you that it was your fault that you didn't like it, that would sound stupid, right? If I said it's your fault that you had bad taste, a logical reaction would be, why is it my fault? Isn't it possible that the show just wasn't well written? But when it comes to finding a story boring, it seems like blaming the viewer for their boredom is commonly accepted. Instead of examining why the viewer found it boring, it's just, you have a short-term attention span. So a story can never be boring? I think that's ridiculous. Maybe the viewer just didn't find it well written or entertaining. Let's talk about boring shows. There are a lot of critically acclaimed shows that I find boring while I'm watching them. But when I watch a summary that covers the key moments, it actually sounds interesting. I theorize that it has some connection to the 80-20 rule. Roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of causes. In story terms, 80% of the story's quality or enjoyment comes from 20% of the story. I believe these summaries made the story sound less boring because they were focusing on the 20% of the events that created the 80% of the audience enjoyment. They cut out the fat. But I don't find most stories boring. So what's the difference? I believe it is in how the writers handle the 80% of scenes that create the 20% of enjoyment. A lot of these boring stories, that shall remain nameless, don't put that much effort into making the 80 entertaining. They just phone it in and rely on the 20 to keep their audience hooked. Looking back, I can kind of respect that. But what separates a boring show from a show where there's never a dull moment is the amount of effort and quality put into the 80. My three favorite examples are Monogatari, Rascal, and Quintuplets. The kids these days would identify these shows as professional yappers. Characters just talk for most of these shows, yet even their most mundane conversations are fascinating. I know some of you thought I just wanted to see a bunch of action and fights. Nope, I just need quality, and that can take shape in many forms. By making the 80 that doesn't even amount to much still entertaining, the stories managed to be the opposite of boring, never having a dull moment. Vinland Saga Season 2 was very boring for 80% of the season. All that farming crap was abysmal, but for 20% of the season, it turned up to 11 and created some of the most iconic scenes in the entire story. Those scenes created 80% of the audience's enjoyment on average. So even if the 80 scenes were completely garbage, they only amounted to 20% of the grade, giving the season a B-. I can respect that. On the other hand, Frieren at the funeral gets a 0 on both his 80% scenes and his 20% scenes. It just never turns up.